that Prabhupada wrote for us when he started to write his purport for Bhagavad Gita. So we have chapter 1, text 1, and you all know what's happening in that. Dhritarashtra is looking out, not able to look out, but hearing, please tell me, what are my sons and the sons of Pandu going to do? They look like they're going to fight. And Srila Prabhupada starts his purport with some really lovely, interesting, it might look pretty simple at first, and what I was really interested in is how much depth there is in every single word here. So he starts with Bhagavad Gita, right, is the widely read theistic science. Okay, so widely read. Bhagavad Gita is, Srila Prabhupada here is saying, Bhagavad Gita is widely read. We could look at that from a lot of different ways, and they're all good ways to look at it. I bet if I asked every one of you what widely read meant to you, we would have so many different angles on it. So many interesting insights from everybody's different angle of vision. And we know that Prabhupada wanted us to study the scriptures very carefully from many angles of vision, every angle of vision that we can think of, and to discuss it threadbare. So let's look at it threadbare. Let's look at word for look at each word and what it contains. So widely read, that could talk about, so many places in the world. What do you think? Is Bhagavad Gita fairly widely read if we're talking about geography? Yeah? Yeah, lots of places in the world. We're in Canada. We know what's happening in the States. We know what's happening in India. We know what's happening in the Bhaktivedanta Manor. So yeah, widely read is true. We even know what's happening in Russia and China. So widely read geographically, that's true. Widely read from a sense of, like, Bhagavad Gita has been around for how many years? How many thousand years? 5,000 years. And during those 5,000 years, did it keep being read? Yeah. So in sense of time, it's also been widely read. And do only one kind of people read Bhagavad Gita? Do only children read Bhagavad Gita? Do only adults read Bhagavad Gita? Do only rich people read Bhagavad Gita? Widely read. Okay, so I think it's true. Widely read from so many points of view, and if we went around the room, we'd probably find other ways of looking at widely read. So there's really a lot to think about just in those two words. Widely read. Then Srila Prabhupada says, Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science. What do you think when you think science? There's proof, logic, method.
There are experiments done.
Experiments done? Yes, yes. The scientific method, hypothesis, experiment, see what happens. See, and then try it again, and have other people try it again. See if it comes out the same. That's a science. I'm sure many of you here are engineers and doctors and biologists and chemists and pharmacists and other careers that have studied science. And Srila Prabhupada here is not saying this is religion. He's saying this is a science. So, with everybody's experience of science, we could probably also dig deep and find that there's a lot just in that fact that Srila Prabhupada is saying Bhagavad Gita is a science. Now we notice he's got an adjective in front of science. He said it's a certain kind of science, theistic science. Now that's a word we don't talk about every day. We don't go around probably mentioning it at the breakfast table or anything about, hey, I think that I'm going to have a theistic something today. We don't usually say that. We're much more likely to speak about the opposite word. Even that we might not say from one year to the next, but we are more likely to use the word atheistic, right? So atheistic means what?
One who doesn't believe in God.
Yeah, no God. Opposite of theistic. And theistic, of course, like theology, is referring to there being a supreme God. So, Srila Prabhupada is saying that this is a theistic science. So he's saying it's not an atheistic science. There are atheistic science, although science, as we know as physical science, it's not really about the matter of God. So we do need a science of God. So here we have a science of God. And there's so many more things we could dig into that about what does it mean to say it's a theistic science. But let's move on to a little what Srila Prabhupada says next. He says that the Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. Okay, let's look at summarized first. What does summarized mean? If something's been summarized, what do you expect?
Essence given in smaller sense, in lesser words.
Essence given without taking up as much space in words. Yeah, the distilled. Yeah, so that's one summarized. Yes. Some people for summarized might go for an outline, bullet points, or there might be some other ideas of what could be summarized, and they're all right. They're all correct. You know, we understand from what Srila Prabhupada has taught us that Krishna really likes variety. So all our variety of answers, all our angles of vision are all good. We see, you know, no two snowflakes alike, no two fingerprints alike, no DNA exactly alike unless you happen to be identical twins. So there's, in whatever we know about Krishna and what he likes, we know he likes variety. He doesn't want cookie cutter, or he would make all the snowflakes exactly the same. And he would make everybody's fingerprint exactly the same. But instead, he's got such variety. You know, they say variety is the spice of life. Krishna likes pleasure. He gets pleasure from all the variety. And, you know, sometimes we think that it would be nice not to have the variety because then everybody would agree with me. But apparently, if you're really confident in your supreme role, as Krishna is, you really like variety. You don't have to have everything exactly the same. You're really happy when there's differences and other angles of looking at things. So the other angles can enrich it. It doesn't have to be exactly like me and agree with me in order for it to be useful. So we have here that the theistic science is summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, which means glorification of the Gita. Okay, why is he telling us right here, Gita Mahatmya? Where does Gita Mahatmya come from? Where does that come into it? Well, if we read the introduction, you know, we just chanted that lovely Mangalachara. So there's this much of the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, about 30 pages. Yep, 30 pages is a fantastic essay. Really an amazing introduction to the subject matter of the Gita. And at the end of it, Srila Prabhupada quotes and unpacks a little the Gita Mahatmya of Adi Shankar. And so it's there, all 7 slokas of it. And so apparently, most likely, he's talking about that Gita Mahatmya since it's just, 2 pages away. So he says that Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. So let's see, does the Gita Mahatmya have any summary of Bhagavad Gita? So the first verse says that if one properly follows the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, one can be freed from all the miseries and anxieties of life. One will be freed from all fears in this life, and one's next life will be spiritual. Okay, maybe that's the summary, maybe that's the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Freed from all the miseries and anxieties of life if we properly follow the instructions. If we treat it as a science and actually take the steps that are outlined. And then the second shloka Gita Mahatmya, if one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Oh, often when it often happens when I give a class to students, like university-aged young people, often the questions at the end are pretty much always, what can I do about my karma? How do I get free of the reactions of my past life and my present life activities? And here we have, if one reads the Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Okay, that's a pretty good way to get free of fear, actually. If you know that by reading Bhagavad Gita sincerely, it will relieve you of your past misdeeds reactions. And then Srila Prabhupada goes straight to another verse from Bhagavad Gita, from the very near the end of Bhagavad Gita, 1866. Does anyone know what 1866 says in Bhagavad Gita? Some of you probably know. Abandon all varieties of religion, sarva dharman parityajya. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So there again we see delivering from sinful reactions and no need to fear. Krishna doesn't want us to be fearful. We're his beloved children, we're his sparks. He doesn't want us to be fearful. So it's interesting that in the purport for 1866, that verse is also identified as a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. So, and Srila Prabhupada has them here right side by side. He's got Gita Mahatmya, the second sloka, and then he's got the abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. And so, you've all done some math where A equals C and B equals C. So what can we say about A and B? A must equal B, right? Or at least a big chunk of A and B have got a lot to do with each other if we're talking about words, not numbers. So then we could find out a very interesting thing from that. We find that by the end of Bhagavad Gita, the advice that Krishna gives to Arjuna in this very life-threatening and heartbreaking situation that he's in is abandon all varieties of religion. It's not about, ekadashis, or it's not about, vows, or it's about just surrender unto me. And so, that's Krishna, of course. So Krishna is saying, just surrender. I remember many years wondering, how do you surrender? I would like to surrender. What do I do? How do you surrender? Obviously, the thing to do is surrender, but what does it even look like? And Arjuna even kind of asked Krishna that a little earlier in Bhagavad Gita. One situated in transcendence. What is that? What does he walk like? What does he sit like? What does he talk like? So how do we do it? How do we just surrender? Well, if A equals C and B equals C and A equals B, then one big aspect of surrender is if one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness. So there's a good starting point for that surrender to Krishna. Reading Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness. And I would like to suggest that that includes looking deeply at every single word in Srila Prabhupada's purports. Srila Prabhupada was a very unique person, obviously, very wise, almost a genius, and he had, when he was writing the purports for all the books that he translated, he had a stack of commentaries beside him. They were all in Sanskrit and Bengali, I'm not going to learn enough Sanskrit and Bengali in my life to know what's in there. He was distilling them and getting the essence of them into his purports for us. He knew from listening carefully to his spiritual master, he knew from a lifetime of study, he knew from the works of Bhaktivinoda Thakur what the essence of the Vaishnava tradition is. And so he knew what he can safely tell us. And so he's telling us that Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. And there we've just seen the summary. Now, next sentence. What's in the Gita? Okay, he says, there it says. So there, he's going back to Gita Mahatmya. There it says, what we just learned, one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly. There's an awfully big word, scrutinizingly. It goes back to a noun, scrutiny. Do you know that word, scrutiny? You know, sometimes people get upset with what their governments do, you know, and they say there should be some kind of an investigation, there should be some scrutiny into how they spend the money. So that's, you know, scrutiny is like really getting into it, tearing it apart and looking at every little bit. So we are supposed to study the Bhagavad Gita like that, like we're having an investigation. Like the Bhagavad Gita is under scrutiny by us, and we're going to really find out what's going on. So that's how we're supposed to study the Bhagavad Gita. And then he says, with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna. We don't have to do this alone. It's even better if we do it with help. What kind of things are help when you're studying the book? You study. Yes?
Discussion, association.
Discussion in association with devotees, thank you. Yes, to discuss it with somebody else. Quite likely, they'll have a different take on it. And it will open up windows for you to things that you didn't realize before.
I have one more. Yes. Having a teacher explain.
Having a teacher explain it. That can be a really big help, right? If you've got somebody who's spent a couple years scrutinizingly studying it, they may already have seen some of those angles. And so that will be a big help. You can get guidance from someone who's more advanced in studying it and applying it to their life. That would be a big help. And you can also, yes?
The scrutiny means this.
It's my book.
Does scrutiny mean looking very carefully at every word and putting post-its in and maybe underlining some? Yes, it can definitely mean putting post-its in and bookmarking things and making notes on your computer or in a notebook. Yes, it can definitely mean all that. And, you know, of course, it's very, very helpful to have a guide that's gone through the same path. It can also be helpful to have somebody who's going through it with you, who hasn't gone through it before. You're both going at it fresh. You're both having similar questions, and you're both, it's a kind of a, their experience is similar to yours, and you're exploring together. It can also help, you can also get help from somebody who is what is called a complete newbie, right? Because sometimes their angles of questions will go like, wow, where did that come from? But it'll be very useful, like, where did that come from? Where is that going to go? So you can get help from so many angles, as long as the person is a devotee of Sri Krishna, you know, as long as they're willing to buy into that theistic science of it. If it's all, you know, as long as they're willing to allow for the existence of Krishna. So obviously there's a lot you can get out of this, and there's half a sentence left with one really big thing in it. Okay, so there it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly, with the help of a person who's a devotee of Sri Krishna. Obviously, we could unpack that a lot. Who counts as a devotee? We won't tonight. And the next thing is, and try to understand it. Let's just look at that. Does Srila Prabhupada say we have to get it? We have to understand it? He says, even if you try. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like 100% successful in this. It's our effort. It's our try. This is one place where it's good to try. So that the mercy of that, just to try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. Personally motivated interpretations, what's Prabhupada kind of implying there?
One is not doing it for earning money.
What, someone who's not doing it for their own earning money or for their own gain in some way?
People who interpret it to justify something they were going to do anyway.
People who interpret it to justify something they were going to do anyway. Going through scripture to cherry pick a few phrases to say, oh yes, I can have 7 wives, or something they are, wanting to do, and they'll just use the scripture to try to pick out a few phrases that'll seem to back up their thing they want to do. Somebody, you had your hand?
To kind of puff up to be how well.
To puff up their ego, yes. And one of our philosophy is so nice that there's an answer for everything. And you can actually win the arguments in the, university coffee shop about, these existential issues when you know our philosophy really well. And unfortunately, that could lead to a little bit of ego. That could lead to feeling pretty, liking that feeling of being able to win the arguments. And so we wouldn't want that to take over. We wouldn't want to become personally motivated by that. We also know that Srila Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita, and he called it Bhagavad Gita as it is. At the time that he translated Bhagavad Gita for us, were there any other Gitas available to read? Yeah, there were, weren't there? There were a few, but Prabhupada felt like he could not in good faith recommend them. And a lot of the reason for that was because some of these other editions of the Gita they were kind of trying to ride on the Gita's popularity and trying to load their own philosophy into the Gita, and so some of them would actually say things like, when Krishna says surrender unto me, he doesn't mean surrender unto me. He means surrender unto the principle that, and so, but Srila Prabhupada brought to us wisdom from a tradition that says Krishna is a person. Krishna and Arjuna had this conversation. When Krishna says something, he basically means what he basically says. So that's why Srila Prabhupada went so far as Bhagavad Gita as it is, where the intent of Bhagavad Gita is the purports that he's writing are based on the conclusions right within Bhagavad Gita. So without personally motivated interpretations. So I want to give a few minutes for questions. And I also, just before that, while you're thinking about your questions, I wanted to just really I just personally want to express a really big thank you to Srila Prabhupada for going through all that work, writing, billions of words and in all his books, and distilling the Vedas for us, letting us know what applies to us in Kali Yuga. Especially, we show our respect to Srila Prabhupada, and in the pranams that we say, we thank him for coming to the Western countries, which are full of impersonalism and voidism. he knew what to do for the modern world, for the West. He's the one that really knows how to take that wisdom from the ancient times and apply it today. So I just wanted to say a great big thank you to Srila Prabhupada for that. Srila Prabhupada ki. So are there any questions, concerns, complaints, realizations? What do you usually do for questions? Do you? Okay, they have a mic to hand you. Who wants to ask a question? Here's a question over here. Does it have to be clicked on somehow, somewhere?
Sure. So in the report was mentioned the theistic science. So I have a kind of a technical question from the Bhagavatam. When Prahlad was learning from Shukracharya, would that be considered an atheistic science? Like learning about the Vedas?
Do you have a thought on that? Well, the atheistic or theistic aspect of it is more in the heart of the learner than it is in the science itself. And the reason for that is because there isn't anything anywhere that isn't an energy of Krishna. Sometimes we like, ooh, material energy, but Krishna in Bhagavad Gita calls it this divine energy of mind. So the science of discerning what do atoms look like, the science of how does electricity work, all those things. The scientist is the atheist or theist person, but the science itself is always Krishna's science. The science of how teamwork happens. How's that? Forming, norming, storming, forming, storming, norming, performing. All those things that you can learn in the corporate world of how to get ahead in. The corporate world is using it to make money. That's making it not exactly theistic. But all of that knowledge, all that information about how it works, which is what science is about, right? That's Krishna that made it how it works. So the atheistic aspect or the theistic aspect is in the heart of the explorer, the scientist, the user. Do we use it for Krishna? Do we use it for our own puffed up egos? What do we use it for? That's where the atheist-theist aspect comes in. Does that help? Any other questions?
Krishna, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. I wanted to ask, the atheistic doesn't mean that follows the false ego?
Atheistic?
Yeah.
We all have false ego, because false ego means I am, right? And anything that we finish that sentence with that isn't technically true is false. So ego, I am an old white lady, okay? It's actually not true because I'm a spirit soul. I'm a spark of Krishna. So when I'm thinking I'm anything related to my body, that's false ego, right? Because it's a false finishing of the sentence I am. There's literally only one correct. There is a correct ego, right? But there's only one way to properly finish that sentence. Well, the general idea, I am a servant of Krishna, right? I am a spark of Krishna. I am beloved of Krishna. I am a lover of Krishna. Those things are true ego, right? But any of the other things that relate to my body or my mind or my temporary position in the way all the humans are all interacting or any of that, that's false ego. So a person could have, for your actual question, most atheistic understandings of things are automatically in the false ego category because they're not allowing for that part of the sentence that goes, servant of Krishna, lover of Krishna, because there's no Krishna in atheist, right? So you have false ego there. It's also that false ego is very sticky, and even when we start in on our scientific exploration of spiritual life, we may not immediately be able to drop all aspects of our false ego right away. It's, like a cabbage, you peel off one leaf and there's another leaf and there's another leaf and oh my goodness, there's another leaf. So it takes a lot of work to keep on peeling off the layers and layers of false ego that we've had been accumulating around our pure spirit soul for so many lifetimes in the material mess. So to answer your question, I think it's true that false ego and atheist goes definitely together, but we can't just say that there's no false ego immediately as soon as we go down the path of theistic science. Yeah, we still got more work to do. Other questions you have time for? We have time for one more question? Is that
Last one.
definitely last one. This one over here.
Yes, Krishna Mother. I have a question on the aspect of saying Bhagavad Gita is science. Because science to me is basically exploring what is around us and making meaning of it and creating something new. Bhagavad Gita is much more beyond that. So Bhagavad Gita is what is there, what can be there, what is not there, what is before life, what is after life. So by calling Bhagavad Gita as a science, are we not belittling the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita?
Srila Prabhupada is calling it a science for a particular reason. It's a reason of great hope. The reason is that, it works if you do it. That it's scientific in that sense. I think somebody up here was saying that as well. You follow the process, you get the result. If it's not a science, then it's either nothing or it's an art. And an art comes out different each time. There's a, touchy-feely thing to it where, and you have to be a genius and a masterpiece, level to make it work. And only some people have that. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us it's not that. It's like, it's plug and play. You do the surrender, you do the serious, you do the sincere, you study his words, you immerse yourself in it, you take the help of other people who are interested in being his devotees, and you will get the result. Whether you're any kind of, extra smart, extra genius, any of those talented, you don't have to be anything of those things. It will work for you, it will work for me, it will work for all of us here. And in that sense, it's a science. Thank you all so much. It's been very, very nice to be here with you. I'm so happy to be at this time.
Thank you so much. We're really appreciative of you coming